welcome to Sleepy Art Critic, where art history meets soft narration. In this immersive ASMR-style documentary, we slip into the surreal mind of Salvador Dalí, the Catalan dreamweaver who turned his every waking thought into a theater of the absurd. From the sun-drenched streets of Figueres to the mirrored halls of his own museum, from melting clocks to impossible mustaches, this is the story of an artist who refused to wake up. Let the soft tones guide you through. A childhood haunted by death and dual identity, the obsessions with Freud, dreams and distorted memory, his stormy, sacred bond with Gala, his muse, manager and mirror, the rise, the exile, the fame, and the spectacle of Dalí himself. A legacy not just painted but performed across time. This isn't just a biography. It's a whispered descent into a world where nothing is as it seems, and everything is Dalí. So, close your eyes, breathe deep, let the surreal dream of Salvador Dalí unfold, one soft word at a time. Do you have a favorite Dalí painting? What surrealist would you like us to explore next? Drop your thoughts in the comments. We read every one. What if time could bend? What if memories had drawers? What if reality, sharp and cold as a cathedral wall, suddenly softened like wax in a fever dream? Somewhere, nestled between the endless waves of the Mediterranean and the windswept plains of Catalonia, that question became a man. Not a man like others, a man who lived as if he had dreamt himself into existence. Salvador Domingo Felipe Jacinto Dalí, Domènech, painter, performer, provocateur, a surrealist, and yet something more, a one-man spectacle, a living contradiction, an artist who made no distinction between art and life, who turned his very breath into a kind of brushstroke. This is not a tale of technique nor of chronology. This is a descent, a spiral staircase into the mind of a man who painted with paranoia and sculpted with obsession. This is a journey through melted clocks and crawling ants, through obsidian eyes and golden canes, through barren plains littered with crutches and skies that boil like thoughts left too long unattended. But first, let us return to the beginning, not just the beginning of a life, but the beginning of a second life, a life born in the shadow of another. Because before Salvador Dalí became a god of dreams, he was something far more fragile, a ghost. In the quiet town of Figueres, under the gaze of the Pyrenees, on the 11th of May, 1904, a child cried into the world. His name was Salvador, but Salvador had already died. 9 months earlier, in the very same house, another Salvador Dalí had perished, the first child of the Dalí family, gone at just 22 months of age, claimed by the fiery breath of scarlet fever. His mother, Felipa, was inconsolable. His father, Don Salvador Dalí, Icusi, a strict notary with a head full of rational thought, became a man sculpted by silence. So when a new child came, they gave him the same name, the same eyes, it seemed, the same birth date nearly, the same room, the same fate. You are him, they told the young Salvador when he was just 5. You are your brother, come back to us. Can a child survive such a thing? Can a mind so young hold the weight of another's absence? From the start, Dalí was never alone, not truly. He walked in the shadow of a boy who never aged. He stared into mirrors and saw not one, but 2 souls gazing back. This duality, this fractured identity, would become the bedrock of his life. And his art, his childhood, was a puzzle box of contradiction. On one hand, the sleepy Catalonian town was idyllic. Sunlit hills, whitewashed buildings, and olive groves whispering secrets to the wind. On the other, a home riddled with strange rituals and ghosts unspoken. Felipa, his mother, believed deeply in nurturing her son's artistic spark. She saw his sketches, his dramatic flair, his eerie silence, and said, "He is special." She fed him stories, mythologies, and oddities. She believed he was destined. His father, meanwhile, enforced order, rules, structure, precision. His was a world of inked signatures and legal truths. Between them, the boy learned both freedom and fear. And then there was his beloved younger sister, Anna Maria, his first model, his first confidant, and later a soul he would cast aside without mercy. But as a boy, Dalí was both adored and unmanageable. He bit other children. He refused to wear anything but clothes of his choosing. He demanded to sleep in strange positions. He began painting at age 6 and would throw tantrums if anyone dared suggest improvement. At 10 years old, a pivotal moment, he painted his first known piece, an impressionistic view of the Cap de Cruz, vivid, unstable, emotional. His father hung it in the family's dining room. Dalí looked at it every day, and each day it changed. Not on canvas, but in his mind. This was no mere scene. It was a portal, a gesture to the unknown. By age 12, he discovered a strange pleasure in pain. He'd press himself against stone walls, wander barefoot into thorn bushes. Later, he'd write that he once threw himself down a flight of stairs just to experience the sensations that followed. Was it masochism? Was it attention-seeking? Or was it the early rumblings of what would become his signature worldview? That all pain, all feeling was worthy of art. And so the young Dalí, barely a teenager, grew more eccentric by the hour. He took to staring at himself in mirrors for hours. He began to believe that he was descended from the Moors, from pharaohs, from gods. He would dream entire days away, then retell them as if they had actually happened. One story tells of him pushing a friend off a bridge simply to prove his dominance. He later said, "I knew in that moment I was a genius, not because I was cruel, but because I was aware of the cruelty and chose to sculpt it into truth." When his mother fell ill with uterine cancer in 1921, Dalí was only 16. She died within months. He was inconsolable. Years later, he would write, "I lost my mother, and with her, the thread that tethered me to the earth." His father remarried, shockingly, to Felipa's own sister. Dalí saw it as betrayal. He turned inward, then outward. The canvas became his confessional, but already his early works, bold, surreal, awkwardly spiritual, hinted at the explosive vision yet to come. And yet before Dalí could ignite the world, he had to be exiled from it. He had to become a stranger among strangers. And so he left for Madrid, to the Royal Academy of Fine Arts of San Fernando, to madness, to muses, to obsession, and to revolution. Madrid, 1922, a city of revolutionaries and poets, of whispered philosophies and trembling governments, a world in transition, perfect for a boy who rejected transitions entirely. Salvador Dalí arrived at the Residencia de Estudiantes, wearing long hair, high collars, and a cape. A cape. He looked like a 19th century vampire lost on the wrong train. And yet no one could look away. Among the elite art students, Dalí stood apart, not just for his fashion or his fierce Catalonian accent, but for his defiance. He refused to conform to assignments, rejected criticism, argued with professors, claimed he knew more than they did, and perhaps he did. Here in this intellectual crucible, Dalí found his constellation. There was Luis Buñuel, a filmmaker with eyes like blades. There was Federico Garcia Lorca, a poet whose words felt like incantations, and a host of others who drifted in and out of Dalí's orbit, captivated, confused, often betrayed. With Lorca, a deep and complex intimacy formed. They shared letters, glances, poetry. Lorca fell in love. Dalí recoiled, not out of cruelty, but out of fear. Fear of love, of labels, of the tethering effect of deep connection. He would later describe Lorca as his secret moon, a relationship too sacred for the physical world. Their bond would haunt him for decades. Meanwhile, in the studios of San Fernando, Dalí painted with increasing ferocity. Cubism, futurism, impressionism. He devoured them all and spit them out as something new. He read Freud obsessively. Dream analysis, hysteria, the subconscious. The idea that the irrational could be mapped, that dreams could be translated like languages, it was revolutionary. For Dalí, it was revelation. He began painting not what he saw, but what he felt. Not what existed, but what shouldn't exist. He was eventually expelled for declaring that no one at the academy was qualified to judge him. He was right. Salvador Dalí was expelled before he graduated. Not for scandal, not for incompetence, but for arrogance of the most deliberate kind. When the examiners came to evaluate his final year at the Royal Academy of Fine Arts of San Fernando, Dalí refused to be judged, not metaphorically, literally. He stood tall, proud, and declared, "I am infinitely more intelligent than these 3 professors, and I therefore refuse to be examined by them. I know this subject far too well." They expelled him the next day. But by then, Dalí had already begun constructing a far greater curriculum, one where dreams were textbooks, desire the teacher, and identity the ever-shifting ink across every page. In the years that followed, Dalí's world widened. He traveled, he absorbed, he devoured visual cultures and regurgitated them in new, frightening configurations. He became fascinated by Hieronymus Bosch and Giovanni Battista Piranesi, by De Chirico's metaphysical cities, by the optics of Vermeer, by the sacred grotesque of El Greco. But above all, he obsessed over one thing: Sigmund Freud. To Dalí, Freud was more than a man. He was the cartographer of the unconscious, the archaeologist of the soul. He carried the interpretation of dreams like a gospel. He underlined passages, memorized case studies. He studied hysteria and fantasy and wrapped them around his identity like a second skin. It was through Freud that Dalí learned to paint what could not be seen. He returned to Figueres often during this time, his eccentricity now calcified. He wore a cape even in summer. He shaved parts of his head to enhance the shape of his skull. He began to paint compulsively, as if to empty himself of demons. But those demons only multiplied. He wrote in his diary of visions, of horses without eyes galloping through his childhood dreams, of ants consuming his hand, of love and death blurred into a single suffocating sensation. He was teetering. He needed a movement, a philosophy, a mirror to reflect and distort his truth. He needed surrealism. Paris, 1929, the beating heart of art, the lung through which the avant-garde exhaled fire, the city of Picasso, of Man Ray, of Breton, and now it became Dalí's crucible. At 25, he arrived with a hunger more intense than admiration. He wanted to surpass, to explode the rules, not follow them, to bend dreams to his will and turn canvas into hallucination. He met André Breton, the Pope of Surrealism, a Marxist with a poet's spine and a missionary's fury. Breton had founded the movement years earlier, inspired by Freud and Dadaism. Surrealism sought to liberate the unconscious, to bypass reason, to unshackle imagination from morality and convention. Dalí, he saw an opportunity not just for expression, but for domination. Within months, Dalí was a star within the surrealist circle. He brought with him not just talent, but electricity. He shocked them, frightened them, dazzled them. He painted dreams not as metaphors, but as mechanisms. He showed melting clocks, limp watches, rotting animals, limbs of drawers, phallic towers, eyeballs with lashes like daggers. He made the impossible scientific. It was during this phase that he developed his infamous method, the paranoiac critical method, a process of self-induced delirium that allowed Dalí to see multiple realities within a single object. He described it as a spontaneous method of irrational knowledge based on the critical and systematic objectivity of the associations and interpretations of delirious phenomena. Translation? He trained his mind to hallucinate at will, then painted the hallucinations with photographic precision. His paintings became architecture for madness. In The Persistence of Memory, 1931, Dalí delivered the icon that would define him. Melting clocks draped over branches and boxes, ticking away in a barren land of psychosexual desolation. Time is no longer linear. Memory is no longer stable. Consciousness, a mere skin stretched over a desert of desire. Breton was thrilled at first. Dalí was hailed as a master of surrealism. His works exhibited in Paris, London, New York. He became a sensation. But already, cracks were forming. Dalí was not just painting dreams. He was turning himself into one, and the line between art and artist, between reality and performance, was disappearing. Then came Gala. Her name fell like a stone in his world, and the ripples would never stop. Born Elena Ivanovna Diakonova, she was a Russian émigré, wife to poet Paul Eluard, fierce, cold, magnetic. When Dalí met her in 1929, something primal ruptured inside him. He would later write, "She was destined for me, and I for her. Together we will make gods jealous." Gala became his muse, his manager, his keeper, and his queen. She nurtured his genius and shielded his chaos. She organized his life while he obliterated it in paint. They became inseparable. He renamed her Gradiva, after the mythic muse from Wilhelm Jensen's novella, analyzed by Freud himself. She would appear in dozens of his paintings, often nude, often distant, always revered. But Gala came with shadows. She had affairs. She managed Dalí's finances ruthlessly. She aged, and Dalí grew terrified of her aging, and yet without her, he unraveled. To love Gala was to sacrifice stability, to surrender to the sublime cruelty of obsession. But Dalí never wanted peace. He wanted intensity. Together, they built a world that was both sanctuary and spectacle, a kingdom of two, ruled by contradiction. To understand Dalí's paintings, one must abandon reason, or perhaps sharpen it to the point of rupture. His works are not meant to be read, but decoded. Each element a glyph, each shadow a whisper, each surface a map of neurosis, fetish, fear, and yearning. Let us now wander into the anatomy of Dalí's dreams. Ants, crawling, swarming, consuming. Dalí's relationship with ants began in childhood. He once saw a dead bat covered in them. The image stayed with him forever. To Dalí, ants symbolize decay, death, the fear of disintegration. They appear on clocks, on hands, on lips, a reminder that beauty is impermanent. The time is a corpse dressed in velvet, crutches, odd, angular, fragile. They prop up soft forms, flesh, trees, even the sky. The crutch in Dalí's world is both support and lie. It's the scaffolding that holds up fantasy. It represents the artificiality of strength, the illusion of self-sufficiency. He once said, "The crutch is the measure of our own collapse." Drawers, yes, drawers, opening from chests, hips, foreheads. Inspired by Freud's theories of repression, the drawers symbolize the compartments of the subconscious, hidden traumas, buried memories, sexual desires folded like laundry inside the human form. Dalí believed we are all furnished beings, cabinets of secrets, locked rooms of shame and splendor, the soft watch, malleable, mournful, dripping. Perhaps the most iconic image in modern art, time, Dalí claimed, is not fixed. It bends, it melts, it becomes irrelevant in the dream state. He once described the watches in the persistence of memory as camembert cheese melting in the sun. Not philosophical, visceral. Time is not logic. It is texture. And finally, the landscape. Dalí's plains, endless, yellow, desolate, mirror the flat, sun-scorched terrain of Catalonia. They are interior topographies, his cliffs, his mind, his empty skies, the absence of God, his long shadows, the weight of guilt. Dalí painted not just what he dreamed, but how he dreamed, with obsession, with distortion, with erotic terror and sacred reverence. His works are not surrealism. They are Dalínian, a category unto themselves. It is rare that a single meeting divides a life into before and after. But when Salvador Dalí met Gala, time split like one of his melting clocks. She stepped into his world in the summer of 1929 during a visit to Cadaqués. A mysterious woman with piercing eyes and an air of command, Gala arrived with her husband, the French poet Paul Éluard, to see this rising Catalan star. Dalí, young and volatile, expected to impress them all. He did not expect to fall under a spell. He later wrote, "She was destined for me." The woman of my dreams had now materialized, like a specter given shape, and indeed Gala was like no other. Born Elena Ivanovna Diakonova in Kazan, Russia, in 1894, Gala had endured poverty, exile, illness, and 2 world wars. She had been institutionalized as a young woman, her body and mind sharpened in the fires of survival. But where others saw trauma, Dalí saw divinity. To him, Gala was not a woman. She was a myth, an archetype, a goddess who could order the chaos that spiraled inside him. They began a secret affair during that very trip. By autumn, it was no longer a secret. Gala left Éluard. She stayed in Spain. She stayed with Dalí. His father was outraged. A married Russian woman 10 years his senior? Scandal? Blasphemy. When Dalí exhibited a painting of Christ with the words, "Sometimes I spit on my mother's portrait," for the fun of it, his father disowned him. Dalí laughed and celebrated. "Now I am truly free," he said. "The true artist is always an orphan." With Gala at his side, Dalí transformed. She managed his exhibitions. She arranged sales. She polished his reputation even as he dirtied it in interviews. She became his publicist, accountant, mistress, priestess. And Dalí became more Dalí than ever before. Their love was not tender. It was ritualistic. She humiliated him sexually, an open secret he embraced. He, in turn, deified her, painting her as Virgin, Venus, Madonna, monster. They fed each other's needs and neuroses in a loop of obsession, and together they created a performance that would last 5 decades. To the world, they seemed surreal themselves. In New York, they wore matching capes. In Paris, they paraded monkeys. At dinner parties, Gala would speak for him. Only for Dalí, to interrupt with cryptic incantations. Behind closed doors, things were stranger. Dalì demanded she appear nude at certain hours simply to admire. He painted in silence for days, then exploded in rants about death and decay. And yet when she left, he collapsed. Dalì was many things: genius, narcissist, prophet, fool. But to Gala, he was a child. And she, his mother, mistress, muse. The Dalì-Gala dyad was no fairy tale. It was a mythic cycle: creation, destruction, worship, exile, return. They would wound each other countless times. She would leave for younger lovers. He would lash out in cryptic paintings. But they always returned, like gravity, like fate. Dalì once said, "Without Gala, I am nothing. With her, I become everything I fear and desire." 1929. Paris was a storm of ideologies and movements. Dada had exploded. Cubism had splintered. Surrealism was ascendant, and in its burning center, Dalì arrived. He reconnected with his old companion, Luis Buñuel, the filmmaker from Madrid. Together they hatched a plan. Not a film, a rupture, a 20-minute explosion of logic, narrative, and sanity. Un chien andalou, a film with no story, no purpose, no morality. They agreed on one rule: no idea or image that might lend itself to a rational explanation. The result? A woman's eye sliced open with a razor, ants crawling from a hand, dead donkeys and pianos, a man dragged by priests, clocks melting, time fractured, meaning annihilated. Premiering at Studio des Ursulines, the film shocked the Paris elite. Some fainted, some screamed, others applauded wildly. Breton was impressed. Picasso intrigued. The surrealist circle welcomed Dalì as one of their own. But Dalì didn't belong. Not really. He used the movement, but he never served it. While the surrealists clung to leftist ideals, Marxism, atheism, anti-bourgeois revolution, Dalì delighted in contradiction. He praised capitalism. He flirted with Catholic mysticism. He claimed Hitler had a masochistic charm, a quote that horrified even his admirers. He once painted the enigma of Hitler, a stark portrait of the dictator surrounded by telephones and beans. The surrealists were furious. Dalì's political provocations were too much. Breton, the movement's founder, led a tribunal. Dalì was summoned. He arrived in a cloak, carrying a thermometer. When questioned, he responded, "The only difference between me and a madman is that I am not mad." They expelled him in 1934. Dalì was unfazed. "Surrealism is me," he said. "I do not need to be a member of a movement that I invented." And to some extent, he was right. No other artist personified the psychosexual theater of surrealism with such commitment. No one blurred the line between art and persona so completely. Dalì didn't just paint surrealism, he performed it, he lived it. After the fallout, Dalì doubled down. He painted obsessively, he designed theater sets, he published books. He shocked, offended, seduced. In 1934, he and Gala traveled to New York. Their arrival was met with chaos. Dalì, wearing a glass case around his chest, declared, "I am the first person to bring surrealism to America, and I shall infect it like a glorious virus." He succeeded. Within a year, he was a celebrity, a darling of the fashion world, a guest of Edward James, Coco Chanel, and Harpo Marx. The surrealists had cast him out. But Dalì had found a new empire. To understand how Dalì created, one must abandon the idea of technique entirely. For Dalì, painting was not execution, it was possession. He spoke of visions, of compulsions, of irrational logic made flesh. And at the core of this was his most famous invention, the paranoiac critical method. The method begins with paranoia, not fear, not delusion, but the deliberate cultivation of multiple realities. Dalí trained himself to see one object as many things simultaneously. A rock becomes a face becomes a horse, a landscape becomes a body. It is associative delirium, a hallucination under control. He said, paranoia is a state in which one sees a unique meaning in meaningless things, and then renders that meaning visible. Examples? In the Metamorphosis of Narcissus, 1937, he paints the mythic youth gazing at his reflection. Beside him, an echo, a hand holding an egg from which a flower blooms. Two images, one idea, love as death, death as bloom. In Swans Reflecting Elephants, 1937, the mirrored lake shows not birds, but tusks. Wings become trunks. Stillness becomes horror. In The Great Paranoiac, 1936, faces emerge from shadows like memories surfacing from trauma. Dalí was not creating, he was channeling. The paranoiac critical method wasn't just for painting. He used it in design, film, writing, even science. He once proposed a surrealist physics based on softness and desire. He declared the time was not a constant but an emotion. He suggested an airplane shaped like a Madonna. He collaborated with Walt Disney on Destino. He planned a surrealist theme park, the Dalí Dome. This method was not a trick. It was a philosophy, a way of rewiring the mind to see what should not be seen. To the rational world, Dalí was mad. To those who understood, he was beyond sanity. He dissolved the boundaries between self and symbol, between canvas and skin, between thought and manifestation. The paranoiac critical method allowed Dalí to become the medium of his own myth. There was a time when Salvador Dalí stopped painting. Not literally, his hand never ceased. But something shifted. Canvas became stage. Brush became performance. Art became Dalí himself. He no longer entered a room, he arrived. Trailing capes, waxed mustache turned upward like crescent moons, eyes wide, speech cryptic. He spoke in riddles. He carried bell jars. He once gave a lecture in a deep-sea diving suit, nearly suffocating on stage. I want to create a sensation of unbearable anxiety, he explained later. He did. Dalí understood something most artists never do, that in the age of mass media, personality is product. He became his own brand decades before the concept existed. Every interview a performance, every word a sculpture. He called himself the Divine Dalí. He referred to his mustache as antennae that receive cosmic transmissions. He claimed he didn't dream because he was the dream. He lived inside a feedback loop of illusion. And the public, hungry for madness, fed the machine. The art world was split. Critics accused him of selling out, of making spectacle in place of substance. But Dalí knew better. He said, "When you are a genius, you do not need to create art. You simply need to exist." Existence itself became his medium. He staged his life like an opera, each day a scene, each outfit a set piece, each contradiction a calculated drama. Dalí was no longer painting dreams. He was living one. This theatricality reached its peak in the 1940s and 50s. Dalí appeared in magazines, on talk shows, in celebrity photo spreads. He designed covers for Vogue. He illustrated Dante's Divine Comedy. He appeared on game shows and claimed to be his own reincarnation. And yet, through it all, he painted. Always, relentlessly. He created massive canvases, deeply spiritual, filled with nuclear imagery, classical references, and architectural illusions. Some were genius, others overwrought, but all unmistakably Dalì. In the theater of his life, Gala remained his producer. She curated his appearances, dictated his fees, controlled his money, monitored his mood swings. Their dynamic remained volatile, strange, sometimes cruel. She aged, he panicked, she withdrew, he chased. But even in torment, he revered her. He painted her as the Virgin Mary, as the Queen of Heaven, as Leda, Helen, Venus, and the atomic Madonna. She was no longer just a woman. She was an idea, a symbol he could never fully decode. The world had never seen anything like Dalì, and perhaps never will again. He was not just a painter. He was a cathedral built from contradictions, madness and calculation, art and advertisement, carnival and cathedral. He once said, "Take me or leave me, but do not attempt to understand me." And the world reluctantly obeyed. America did not understand Dalì, and Dalì didn't care, because America paid attention, and attention was his oxygen. He first visited New York in 1934. By 1940, fleeing Francoist Spain and the shadow of World War II, Dalì and Gala settled in the United States. They took a suite at the St. Regis Hotel in Manhattan, and Dalì took America by storm. He gave lectures titled "Why I Am a Genius." He signed autographs with drawings instead of names. He posed with tigers and lobsters and sailing ships made of wax. He painted store windows for Bonwit Teller and Macy's. He collaborated with Walt Disney on an animated short. He designed surreal dream sequences for Alfred Hitchcock's Spellbound. He appeared in Life magazine. He advised Schiaparelli on perfume bottles. He hosted parties attended by Greta Garbo and Orson Welles. To the American public, Dalì was not an artist. He was an event. Critics were skeptical. Was he a genius or a fraud? Was his art profound or decorative? Dalì, unbothered, replied, "Let them think me mad. That means they are thinking about me." His paintings during this era grew grander, both in scale and ambition. Gone were the minimalist dreamscapes of the 30s. Now came massive canvases filled with religious iconography, nuclear symbols, and mathematical perfection. He became obsessed with the double helix, with quantum physics, with the intersection of science and mysticism. In The Sacrament of the Last Supper, 1955, Christ and his disciples float in a transparent dodecahedron. In Galatea of the Spheres, Gala's face is atomized into floating orbs. These works fused his Catholic return with atomic age anxiety. They were both transcendent and alienating. To American audiences, Dalì was a delightful enigma. To Europe's art intelligentsia, he was becoming something else, a clown. Breton dubbed him Avida Dollars, an anagram of Salvador Dalí. Greedy for cash, he implied, addicted to fame, and perhaps he was. Dalì sold everything: posters, jewelry, branding designs, even his signature, sometimes hundreds in a day. He justified it all. "I am commercial because I'm not stupid." Yet beneath the flamboyance, something had changed. Dalì was growing older, Gala distant, the art world turning. Abstract expressionism now ruled. Jackson Pollock, Rothko, de Kooning. Dalí's hyper-realism was seen as passé. His theatricality, a joke. He was losing cultural clout, even as his fame soared. He was on the covers of magazines, but not in the galleries of the avant-garde. Still, Dalì endured. In 1948, he returned to Spain. Franco still in power, scandalous in its own right. He claimed art should serve no politics. He built a new life along the Catalan coast in Port Ligat, a labyrinthine house of mirrors, shells, and oddities. There he painted. There he staged. He designed theaters, fountains, and even a surrealist pavilion for the 1939 World's Fair, a dreamscape of mannequins, phones, and rain from the ceiling. Dalí had become less painter, more architect of experience. Fame is a fire. It warms you, lights you, and if you stay too long, it burns you to ash. By the 1960s, Salvador Dalí was a name everyone knew, but few respected. His exhibitions drew crowds, but critics yawned. They said he had become a parody of himself, that he churned out works for money, that he repeated old tricks, mirrors, doubles, melting clocks, without innovation. Young artists dismissed him. Galleries grew cautious. Surrealism had become historic, and Dalí, obsolete. He tried to reinvent. He painted holograms, designed surreal furniture, collaborated with rock bands and filmmakers. He even created a surrealist cookbook. But the magic had thinned. The persona had outgrown the painter. Dalí was now an institution, and institutions do not dream. And then Gala began to fade. She was aging rapidly, withdrawing. She moved into a castle Dalí had bought for her in Pubol. He needed written permission to visit. She was distant, cold. He was panicked, desperate. Her health deteriorated. Her mood soured. She became addicted to medication. Dalí, without her, unraveled. In 1982, Gala died. Dalí was 78. He collapsed into silence. He stopped painting. He stopped performing. He barely ate. He attempted suicide, setting fire to his bed, allegedly seeking reunion with Gala. He was rescued, severely burned. He would never fully recover. The last years were spent in isolation. He moved into the Dalí Theater Museum in Figueres, his greatest monument, a cathedral of the bizarre filled with his works, illusions, and designs. He wandered its halls at night, alone, haunted. His right hand trembled, Parkinsonian symptoms. He could no longer paint. The man who had turned life into art was now a ghost. On January 23, 1989, Salvador Dalí died of heart failure. He was 84. He was buried beneath the stage of his own museum. Not in a cemetery, not beside Gala, but inside a building of his own invention, surrounded by illusions. Even in death, Dalí remained in performance. Even in stillness, he remained spectacle. There is something almost mythic about the decline of a man who once bent time. Salvador Dalí, the titan of dream and spectacle, spent his final years trapped not in fantasy, but in a body slowly forgetting how to be divine. After Gala's death, the colors of Dalí's world began to dissolve. She had been his compass, his priestess, his prison. Without her, he wandered aimlessly within his own mind. And increasingly, inside the Dalí Theater Museum, the grand monument he had designed decades earlier in Figueres, it was not just a museum, it was a cathedral of his obsessions, a mausoleum of myth and material. There were dome ceilings of painted heavens, rooms shaped like faces, mannequins arranged like hallucinations, mirrors, golden skulls, red lips for sofas. This was where Dalí would spend his final days, alone, surrounded by ghosts of his own creation. He tried at first to paint, but tremors in his hands made control impossible. His once fluid brush strokes turned to tremble and smear. He would sit for hours, staring at blank canvases, as if waiting for permission from Gala, from God, from the universe. His voice grew faint. His public appearances ceased. He lived like a forgotten saint inside his own reliquary. Yet even as his body failed, his mind remained restless. He dictated thoughts, aphorisms, dreams. He made plans for holograms, light installations, antimatter artworks that could not decay. He spoke of death not as ending but as metamorphosis. He once said, "Death is not the end, it is the beginning of immortality under a different light." There were moments of tragedy. Caretakers took advantage. There were rumors of forged signatures on prints, of mismanagement, of isolation. In 1984, a fire broke out in his bedroom. Dalí, already fragile, was badly burned. Some say it was an accident. Others, an attempt at suicide. He never clarified. Instead, he retreated further into silence. A figure once louder than life, now whispering in shadows. By the late 1980s, he was largely nonverbal, fed through a tube. His mustache still waxed, still perfect. He refused to die in a hospital. He insisted on staying within his museum, within his dream. He died of heart failure at 84 years old, in the very building he designed to be his temple. His body was embalmed, dressed in his finest suit, his iconic mustache, arched, proud, untamed. He was placed beneath a slab in the central hall of the museum. No tombstone, no epitaph. He became part of the building, part of the performance. Crowds lined the streets in Figueres. Some wept, some painted melting clocks on poster board. The Vatican acknowledged him. Art historians debated him. Collectors scrambled to verify works, and the question hovered, was Dalí a genius or a spectacle? The answer, of course, was always both. Then, in 2017, nearly 3 decades later, his body was exhumed. A paternity suit had been filed by a woman who claimed to be his daughter. Forensic experts opened the crypt. What they found shocked the world. Dalí's mustache was intact, still curved upward at exactly 10 past 10, as he had always styled it. Even in death, the performance continued. The paternity suit was dismissed. Dalí was returned to his resting place, but the moment revealed something deeper, that Dalí's body, like his legacy, remained surreal, beyond decay, beyond time. He had made himself myth, and myths do not die. They mutate. Today, the Dalí Theatre Museum remains one of Spain's most visited cultural sites. Tourists stand above his tomb, unaware they are walking on a legend. His mustache appears on mugs, murals, and advertisements. His works hang in museums from Madrid to New York to Tokyo. His images adorn fashion, music videos, dream sequences, TikToks. He is studied, mocked, worshipped, memed. A contradiction, still, just as he wanted. How do we measure an artist like Salvador Dalí? By paintings, by provocation, by the shadows he cast across the century, or by the fact that we are still dreaming him? He was called mad, but he was precise. He was called vain, but he gave everything to art. He was called shallow, but he plumbed the abyss of the subconscious deeper than any before. Dalí did not seek truth. He sought reality heightened, a world cracked open. He once said, "I do not paint dreams. I paint reality as if it were dream." We live now in a world, Dalí prophesied, where truth is unstable, where identity is performative, where art and commerce blur, where fame is curated, and every moment surreal. Dalí foresaw this. He made himself the blueprint. His paintings endure. The persistence of memory, the elephants, swans reflecting elephants, the temptation of St. Anthony, the disintegration of the persistence of memory, each one an invitation, not to understand, but to enter, to wander a desert where shadows speak, where bodies melt into architecture, where time has no dominion. Dalí once wrote, "There comes a moment when one must choose between being a madman or being understood. I chose both, and in that choice he gave us something rare, a permission slip to imagine, to distort, to dream awake, And so we closed the curtain, not on a man, but on a phenomenon, a mustache that defied gravity, a clock that refused to tick, a life that refused to obey. Salvador Dalí, painter, showman, visionary, or perhaps simply a mirror held up to reality until reality cracked. And so we emerge from a labyrinth of melting clocks, spectral landscapes, and one unforgettable mustache. Salvador Dalí didn't just make art, he became it. A dream sculpted in flesh and spectacle, a paradox that whispered, I am not mad, I am Dalí. If you enjoyed drifting through Dalí's surreal world with us tonight, there are more journeys waiting. Like this video to keep the dream alive. Subscribe for more soft-spoken descents into the lives of extraordinary artists, and tap the bell to be the first to know when a new story unfolds. We've traveled through shadows and symmetries, through fear and flamboyance, but every painting ends, so that another can begin. Until next time, stay curious, stay gentle, and keep dreaming in brushstrokes. Good night from Sleepy Art Critic.